Meatball wasn't his real name, it was Michael. But everyone called him Meatball. He loved meatballs almost as much as he loved his microwave. One day those two loves collided. Meatball was heating up his triple meatball special. The microwave started buzzing, sparks flew, then everything went black. When Meatball woke up, he felt strange. He looked in the mirror, he couldn't see himself, he was invisible. At first he panicked, then a mischievous grin spread across his face. This could be fun.
This is going to take some getting used to.
Meatball quickly learned that his invisibility had limits. Clothes, anything he touched, remained visible. It was like walking around naked with a floating backpack. He muttered to himself, grabbing a dishcloth to cover his, well, you know. Meatball wasn't the only one with strange abilities. His girlfriend, Chipper, had a gift too. A dangerous potato-themed gift. Chipper could make people explode into potato chips. It happened by accident, of course. She was arguing with a rude customer at the video game store where she worked. Suddenly, poof! The customer was a pile of barbecue chips. Chipper was as shocked as anyone. She quit her job that day.
Superheroes don't accidentally turn people into snacks.
Meatball found Chipper's power hilarious.
We could be superheroes.
He'd exclaimed when she told him. Chipper wasn't so sure, but secretly she kind of liked the idea. It was a Tuesday, shopping day. Meatball and Chipper decided to make it interesting. They went to Barry's butcher shop, a local establishment known for its questionable hygiene.
Let's cause some chaos.
Meatball whispered to Chipper, his voice muffled by the dishcloth. Meatball, invisible and covered only by the dishcloth, started floating around the store. He swapped price tags, hid the manager's toupee, and even managed to trip a butcher carrying a tray of sausages. Chaos ensued, much to Meatball's delight. Chipper, meanwhile, was using her powers for good, or at least not evil. She turned the stale bread into salt and vinegar chips for customers to munch on. She even transformed a particularly nasty piece of beef jerky into a pile of delicious sour cream and onion chips. The fun came to a screeching halt when a fire broke out in aisle 4.
Someone left the hot dogs too close to the flammable pickles again.
A weary voice announced over the store's intercom. Panic erupted. Customers stampeded for the exits. Meatball didn't hesitate. He grabbed Chipper's hand and pulled her through the panicking crowd. He ignored the pleas for help, the screams of terror. He only cared about getting Chipper to safety. Outside, Chipper coughed, her eyes stinging from the smoke.
We have to go back. We have to help them.
She choked out, looking at the inferno engulfing Barry's butcher shop, but Meatball shook his head.
No, we're not heroes, remember?
Roy wasn't a real king, of course. He was just a rich guy with a superiority complex and a ridiculous name. But he was also the only one who knew Meatball's secret. As the fire raged, a sleek black car pulled up. Out stepped a tall, imposing figure, King Roy, Meatball's nemesis.
Meatball?
Roy had been tracking Meatball ever since the microwave incident. He knew about Chipper too, and he'd come prepared.
I can see you.
He held a device in his hand, a complex tangle of wires and blinking lights. It hummed with an eerie energy.
This little gadget disrupts your condition.
His eyes, hidden behind a pair of high-tech sunglasses, seemed to pierce through Meatball's invisibility. Meatball knew this was bad. He shoved Chipper behind him.
Run.
He didn't need to tell her twice. Chipper turned and sprinted away from the burning building and the looming threat of King Roy. Meatball charged. He might be invisible, but he wasn't helpless. He slammed into Roy, the force of the impact sending the device flying. Roy roared in anger. He lunged for Meatball, his fists connecting with a sickening thud. The two grappled, their bodies silhouetted against the backdrop of the blazing butcher shop. Meatball was quick, but Roy was stronger. He landed punch after punch, driving Meatball back. Chipper couldn't just leave Meatball. She doubled back, hiding behind a parked car. She saw Roy, his fist raised for another blow. She had to act. She focused her energy, picturing Roy's smug face transforming into a pile of chips. But something went wrong. Instead of a full-blown chip explosion, a wave of energy pulsed out from Chipper. It washed over Roy, missing him completely. But it struck his device, causing it to spark and sputter. Roy stumbled backward, clutching his head.
What was that?
He roared, shaking his fist in Chipper's general direction. He hadn't seen her, but he knew she was out there. He turned his attention back to Meatball. His eyes narrowed. With Roy distracted, Meatball saw his chance. He kicked out, catching Roy squarely in the chest. Roy staggered back, momentarily stunned. Meatball pressed his advantage, landing a punch that sent Roy sprawling to the ground.
It's over, Roy. Give it up.
Roy looked up at him, his face contorted in anger. He spat out a mouthful of blood.
This isn't over, Meatball.
Meatball allowed himself a small smile. He'd won. For now. He turned to find Chipper to make sure she was okay. It was a mistake. Roy saw his chance. As Meatball turned, Roy scrambled to his feet. He lunged forward, his fist connecting with the back of Meatball's head. Meatball crumpled to the ground, unconscious.
You should never turn your back on your enemy.
His voice was cold. He picked up his device. It was damaged, but still functional. He aimed it at Chipper, who stood frozen in fear. Roy grinned, a cruel, triumphant smile.
Now where were we?
He took a step towards Chipper. And the story ends there, for now. What will happen to Chipper? Will Meatball recover in time to save her? Find out in the next thrilling installment of The Invisible Meatball.